Composting manure on farm. So what is compost? Compost is an organic soil conditioner that has been stabilized to a humus-like product. It is free of viable human and plant pathogens and plant seeds. It does not attract insects or vectors, and it can be handled and stored without nuisance and is beneficial to the growth of plants. So how is compost made? Composting is the controlled biological process of the decomposition of organic materials into a humus-rich product that can be used beneficially as a soil amendment or in erosion control. So compost is produced through the activity of aerobic microorganisms that require oxygen, moisture, and food. So why do we want to compost? So composting reduces the number of available nutrients, it kills pathogens, it reduces odor, and reduces the manure volume. So fertilizer, nutrients, and compost are released more slowly than from raw manure. And composting provides a way to store manure until you are ready to spread it. So some requirements of composting. Composting requires a balance of nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and liquid. And when all of this is properly done, the center of the pile of your compost will reach about 140 degrees. And at this point, pathogens are killed and you have a more stable product. Composting also requires the pile to be turned regularly to mix and aerate it. So some advantages of composting. Compost is a valuable soil conditioner that also enhances soil structure. It improves soil nutrient holding and water retaining capacity, and also farmers are able to sell the compost depending on their local market and the quality of the product. Some places they could sell it to are greenhouses, landscapers, home gardeners, golf courses, and vegetable producers. So just some disadvantages of composting. Initial investments can range from $7,000 to over $100,000. They can take up lots of land, so if you don't necessarily have the land requirements for composting, it can be a disadvantage to you. Also, compost manure contains less nitrogen than fresh manure. However, fresh manure is less stable and is more susceptible to leaching than compost manure. Some factors that influence composting: carbon to nitrogen ratio. The ideal ratio is between 25 to 1 and 30 to 1. When ratios fall outside this ideal range, there are odor problems and also longer composting times. Some moisture content is also another factor. So too little or too much moisture can lead to poor composting conditions and decreased microbial activity. And the range you want to be in is about 40 to 60% moisture content. And lastly, size and distribution of feedstock particles. So your range you want to be in 90% cumulative passing through 2 to 3 inch openings usually is sufficient to provide a composting substrate with adequate surface area for microbial degradation and with adequate porosity of the storage of oxygen. So some methods of manure composting include aerated manure composting, windrows, in-vessel composting, passive composting, and vermicomposting. So aerated manure composting, this technique uses blowers to supply air to the composting feedstock. There's no need for turning or agitation after initial mixture. Bulking agents are often used to help maintain the porosity structure of the piles, and it also aids in aeration. Also, electronic controls are used to monitor the temperature of the pile and control the operation of the aerating blowers. Composting manure in windrows. It is the most common method. It's also most labor intensive, and it requires you stacking raw materials into long piles that are turned regularly. Just some disadvantages and advantages of windrows. So some advantages are that it requires no source of electricity, and it can be built in the fields where the compost will be used, so it's there where you want to use it. You don't have to transport very far, and it can use existing equipment to make and maintain the piles. Some disadvantages, so farmers are the ones monitoring the pile temperature, and this is to avoid odor problems and ensure the ingredients are composting. In-vessel composting, it's the most expensive method. It's any type of composting that takes place in a structure, container, or vessel. It relies on mechanical aeration and turning to enhance and decrease the duration of the compost process. And the goal is to combine various composting techniques into one controlled environment. And with this method, there are two types of units. There are bin composters, which take raw materials that are placed in the bins. They are seldom turned and they're aerated by forced aeration from the bottom of the bin. And then there's agitated bed or channel composting, which is where raw materials are placed in channels and are turned regularly by the machine that travels on tracks above the channel, and these channels have aeration pipes. So you see in this picture the agitated bed or channel composting. Passive composting of manure. So what is it? It's stacking feedstocks and leaving them to compost over a long period of time. You place a mix of raw materials in piles on top of a bed of coarse materials such as wood chips, and pipes run through the coarse materials to provide the aeration. Some advantages is that it's less labor is required, so very little activity is performed once it has been constructed. It relies on Mother Nature to draw the cool air and oxygen into the pile as the warm air is released, and this is referred to as the chimney effect. So you see how it pulls the cool air in and the warm air is released up top. And a disadvantage is that it takes longer time to compost. Vermicomposting animal manure. So this process relies on earthworms and microorganisms to help stabilize active organic materials and convert them into a valuable soil amendment. Earthworms will consume most organic materials, including animal manure, agricultural crop residues, organic byproducts, yard trimmings, food preparation scraps, etc. And different types of systems of vermicomposting include windrows, beds, bins, and automated raised bioreactors. Vermicompost, choosing which method is right for you depends on the amount of feedstock to be processed, funding available, site and space restrictions, climate and weather, state and local regulatory restrictions, facilities and equipment on hand, and availability of low-cost labor. Some advantages of vermicompost include improving soil structure, reducing erosion, improves and stabilizes soil pH, increases moisture infiltration in soils, improves moisture holding capacity, and it also causes seeds to germinate more quickly. Also, seedlings are going to grow faster and leaves grow bigger and more flowers, fruits, or vegetables.